Hi YouTube. Another kind of crummy weekend here in Michigan. It's cold and rainy, so I figured I'd give you a quick video, let you see the status of my Cockshutt 40 rebuild here. Talk a little bit about the engine, I guess. So this is a BUDA 6B230 230 cubic inch inline six cylinder. This is a pretty awesome beast. It's made by the Beauty Company out of Harvey, Illinois. And this was a very sought after gas and diesel engine. They actually have a diesel variant made off the same, I believe it's made off the same block, to be honest with you. There's some neat features on this that that you just swap out if you're gonna do a diesel. You'd have a different manifold. Obviously you wouldn't have a carburetor. And then you would have an injection pump hanging off the other side, and a unique head, unique crank, etc. But the foundation block, I believe, is really its carryover, right? It's water cooled. It's got a high mounted water pump that flows through the block and then comes back up into this water manifold. It's got provisions for water temp gauge, and it also has thermostatic control. So there's a thermostat housing inside there. There's a thermostat, and then there's a little bypass hose that goes back to the water neck, and then exits to your radiator through the upper radiator neck there. It is a gas engine. This version is a gas engine, so it's got a kind of your typical carburetor, updraft carburetor. This one's a Zenith, pretty big one, that just connects up through a series of metal pipe back to an air cleaner, a Donaldson air cleaner. Walk around the other side. Get a look at that. So this is, not a whole lot to say there. It's just pretty conventional equipment for all the tractors of this kind of time frame, right? So it's got a inlet through a tube in the center that goes down into an oil bath, and then it goes up through a series of mesh screens and then out, right? So it the idea is that it captures a lot of the dust and any particulate matter before it gets to your engine. They work pretty good. They're kind of messy. This one, the labeling says to service it daily, but who are they fooling? These are they work pretty good, but they're kind of messy, right? Because it's got oil in the bottom there. This also has a kind of a secondary oil filter, so it does have an oil filtration system on it, but it's not an oil filter in the typical sense of like a car engine where it's a priority within the circuit. So this just kind of hangs off the side. It's got a tap into the main oil gallery that goes up, filters oil, and spits it back out through your oil breather attachment here. So it constantly filters oil, but it's not. It doesn't, prevent 100% of particulate matter from getting back into your up into your mains. So it's, I guess the thought process being, it's better to have filtered oil than unfiltered oil, regardless of whether it keeps a filter element right upstream of where it can do the most damage. I mentioned that this was a gas and a diesel. What's really cool is that there's some features on here that if you just pop them off, and they give you provisions for different configurations. So this block off plate that's on the back of the governor, this comes off. This is where your this would be the drive unit for your Bosch pump if you had a diesel version. And then obviously you wouldn't need a spark ignition system, so there's a similar block off plate on the top of this casting feature and other block off plates. So it just bolted on for this setup, bolted on for that setup. It's a pretty ingenious design. So the benefit is it's a really beefy engine, right? It's got super thick, well-designed mains, bearing caps and mains. It's really stout. It's got very simple but elegant kind of a machining setup. There's an oil galley that runs the entire length of the block. And each one of these little pipe plugs is actually, that's the access, the machining access to where they would cross drill the oil feed to your main bearings, to all your main caps. All right, so you can get a look at that. And then at the very end of it, it's got a pressure relief. So there's like a little spring-loaded seat valve that if you were to exceed oil pressure for whatever reason, it cracks the seat, and it just lets that extra oil go back down into your pan. Governor's pretty typical, right? It's just a centrifugal device, so you overspin it, it opens up, and it moves your throttle independent of where your throttle position is. So that's pretty typical. Yeah, overall, it's a pretty neat setup. It does have some different tubes and stuff. So this would be like an oil tap. I believe this is the feed that goes from the bottom of the engine to the top of the engine. So they get oil up to your heads and your valve train. It's got this little 1/4 inch line that goes up here to a T block. That's where you pressure tap off for your gauges, so you know that you have you've got oil pressure when your engine's running. But then this goes into your head, up through like a shaft girdle, and then it goes through the entire cross shaft for all your rockers are, and that's how you oil the top end, essentially. There's some other work I got to do. I got the front end on this because I had to do a bunch of mock-up work for some accessories. Not quite happy with how that's going right now, but I'll work through it. So I have an aftermarket accessory here. This is a Charlin power steering assist motor, also referred to as a Charlevoix, but it's pretty neat little hydraulic machine where you put high pressure hydraulic fluid to it, and there's like a rotary valve, not too different than the rotary valve that's in like a modern power steering rack and pinion setup. So as you turn this, there's a little torsion bar, so it senses when you're applying torque to it, and it just basically cracks that valve ever so slightly, depending on how much torque you're putting into the steering wheel. Cracks the valve, and then it lets fluid flow into like a gear rotor pump, and then it just moves. It gives you some sort of mechanical advantage. So it's a really genius design. And it's all driven off of a separate pump, which wouldn't have come as normal equipment on this tractor. There's a Vickers hydraulic pump, so that's got 2 lines. It goes down to a Vickers hydraulic pump. That's just like a typical vane pump that drives off your primary belt there. So I think I got some work to do. I've got I originally had the original setup here is a 6-volt generator. I got rid of that in lieu of a 12-volt alternator because I converted this over to 12 volts just strictly for dependability and reliability. And that also offers more space in order to package this extra pump, which is it's pretty tight up in here, so it's been kind of tricky. There's some competing parameters with how to get it in here, have enough room so you can tension the belt, have some sort of tensioning device, but also have enough clearance from the exhaust, but also fit it, relatively snug in here so it's not obnoxiously hanging out the side of the tractor, sheet metal. And then also I got a second pulley that's bolted onto the front of the the crank pulley. That's just strictly to drive the alternator. So that's got to live here. So I've got two big components kind of competing for space up here with a really slim margin of clearance. But we'll get there. Yeah, so if you're interested in this kind of stuff, if you're working on a BUDA, or if you're working on a Cockshutt restoration, you have any questions, or you want to know how some of this stuff works, or if you're like me and you got a bunch of weird parts in a box somewhere that you don't know where they go, let me know. Hopefully I can help you from what I've learned. Be good, YouTube. Talk to you next time.